in 5 seconds.
This is our house and our house music. Our house music. Our house music. Our house music.
Yo, check this out.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of my podcast here, the Waxadisc, with me, Rob John Webb. Today I'm going to be talking about musical influences that are not linked to your specific genre that you produce. So, for example, if you produce tech house, but you're influenced by different genres such as rock or pop, etc., I'm going to be talking about that and the reasons why it's important to have outside influences from your genre that you produce. What do I mean by that? Right, okay, I was raised on music my whole life. I was named after Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, of all people. So my life in music was from birth. And Led Zeppelin were a massive, massive band to my dad during the 70s. And then obviously by the 90s, he rekindled his love for them by buying bootlegs and stuff. So in the early 90s, I kind of got influenced by Led Zeppelin, listening to my dad's bootlegs. And for me, Led Zeppelin are probably one of the key bands that I absolutely love. I listen to them, even though I don't produce or write or perform rock music in any way. Their influence on me is quite significant, and the reason for that is I listen to their live recordings of their live bootleg shows from the 70s, and basically, it's the hard and soft element of what they did on stage. It's the dark and the light. It's the heavy and the soft. You know, they were very good at that. They would be brilliant at acoustic numbers and tonality where they would bring the track down and then go off into some crazy space rock sort of stuff, you know, with certain tracks like No Quarter, Dazed and Confused, where Jimmy Page would use the bow on his guitar, all those kind of crazy superstar rock star things. But it was the way that the music would dip and peak and dip and peak, and they would have 25 to 30 minute versions of some songs on stage. The album versions obviously were a lot shorter, but listening to all of their catalogue for me and their live performances on certain songs are massively influential to me, because I love tracks that, you know, go up and down. I use those sort of techniques in my filtered disco house, for example, where I'll build it up from, you know, slow and then kick it in and then drop it and dip it. And sometimes I try to have like a bit of a spacey sort of breakdown, a dubby kind of breakdown. So do you have musical influences that are not related to your specific genre, but heavily are influenced by, you know, it's not just a case of, oh, I like this band, you know, because of A, B, and C. It has a core effect on what you do. It gets right in there. Even if you don't realize it, music from other genres will influence your production techniques in your production. You just don't realize it. It's quite subconscious. So yeah, Led Zeppelin for me are one of those bands that really get in there and, you know, get me thinking. When I listen to their stuff, I love the difference in the dark and the light, you know. And they admit that sort of thing themselves through interviews over the years. So yeah, Led Zeppelin are probably the band for me that got me thinking about landscapes, you know, rather than just having linear tracks. Think about dipping your tracks up and down, you know, soft and light, cold, you know, warm, whatever. All these different textures within music, you can apply them into any other sort of music, really. So yeah, Led Zeppelin is number 1. And another person that is massively influential on me, which again was my dad's influence, which was Pat Metheny. He was a world famous multi-Grammy award winning jazz guitarist. He's been through so many different styles and you know, patterns of music production in his life. He's constantly on the road as a tour artist, but his music, a lot of his early stuff, for example, from 75 onwards into the 80s, early 90s, was massively influential on me as well. I listened to that stuff and it's just incredible. Some of it's ambient, some of it's just straight up jazz, fusion rock sort of stuff. Some of it's quite pop, some of it's quite Latin. There's a load of different styles and textures of music in Pat Metheny's work. He's predominantly a jazz guitarist, you know, but if you listen to his album, As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls, which is an album he made with Lyle Mays in the early 80s, and the landscape soundscapeness of that album is just absolutely brilliant, and that has had a massive effect on when I produce ambient music. So I listen to that and it really gets me. Obviously a lot of it is sentimental and nostalgic through thinking about, childhood and stuff, but because all I heard in my childhood in the 80s was Pat Metheny group. My house was just full of that stuff through my dad. But influential wise and on my music myself, as I grew up and as I grew older, I listened to a lot more of it as I got my musical tastes began to be more spread out. I referred back to those records of what I heard in my childhood and listening to them with older ears, and you'd be surprised how many records you hear as a kid that influence you when you're a lot older. I find anyway. So yeah, Pat Metheny and Pat Metheny group. Obviously, the two are pretty much the same. Pat Metheny does solo stuff, and then he does stuff with the group. But yeah, his stuff is incredible, and influential to me. So that's that one. And then I suppose other bands that are not dancey, I suppose, but they're just are influential in terms of song structure and the chords that they use. Definitely, for me, was Prefab Sprout, which is a UK kind of rock pop band. From up north from the 80s, mostly in the 80s and into the 90s. They don't really function anymore, but their stuff, when I listen to their stuff on sheet music, when I get the sheet music or the chord sheets, I started studying them about 20 years ago. I actually properly studied them, and the chord arrangements on some of their stuff is just brilliant. And as the old saying goes, nobody owns a chord arrangement. People can own melodies, but they don't own chord arrangements. And I used to steal a lot of their chord arrangements and study them and go, wow, they use slash chords and they use this chord and that chord. And it's brilliant. Some of it's just brilliant, sublime pop music. So yeah, there's another band that are not related to dance music, even though they had a great remix done of one of their singles by the Future Sound London in 1992, which was If You Don't Love Me. And the Future Sound London did an incredible progressive breakbeat track around the same time that they did Papua New Guinea. So if you've never heard that, check that out. But other than that, Prefab Sprout were just a straight up pop rock band that wrote some really cool songs. The lead singer, Paddy McClune, went on to make an album called I Troll the Megahertz in 2004. And that was like an ambient sort of soundtrack journey. It was like a 20-minute track, which is worth checking out as well. But yeah, his music and his chord arrangements and his, song structure has had an influence on me as well. And other than that, really, the rest of it's kind of pop dance. I mean, the Pet Shop Boys were a massive influence on me, as you can see the poster behind you. They were my lifelong band as a kid growing up. They were my teenage band, and all of their songs, obviously the Pet Shop Boys came from the dance disco world, so everything they've done, all from the 80s, from the early, 84 to onwards, everything they did always included some credible dance music producer anyway. So I can't really count them as an outside influence. They were my main influence to top it off. So I had Led Zeppelin, rock band, I had Prefab Sprout, pop band, I had Pat Metheny, jazz guitarist, but the Pet Shop Boys were my core influence in me wanting to produce music, along with all the rave stuff and the hip hop stuff as well. But the Pet Shop Boys were that one band that really got me into it, because they would use the hottest remixer of the era. So in the mid 80s they had Arthur Baker, Shep Pettibone, Bobby O, those kind of guys, the Latin Rascals. And then as house music developed, they had Frankie Knuckles, Marshall Jefferson, and then they did a cover of Sterling Void's It's Alright, and then they had Tyree Cooper do mixers, and Dave Morales, and Danny Tenaglia, and all of the big names of dance music. And then all the way up through the 90s, they would have Sasha, Basement Jacks, etc., that did all remixes of them. So they were my core influence. But yeah, outside of dance music, those three bands that I've just mentioned. And then there was a whole load of other stuff that you don't realise as well. Like classical music influences me big time. I listen to a lot of that, of bands that influence me outside of dance music. I hope you enjoyed that. Get in touch with me if you need any music production mentoring whatsoever at Waxadisc.com. Hit me up on all the socials, etc. I'm there. Rob Jam Webb, Waxadisc Music. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.